Alright, good morning everyone. Welcome to the lecture 2. So in today we're going to talk about how organizations to develop a strategic plans, and also we're going to look at the strategic management process in sports organizations. So in the upcoming few lectures, we will be focusing on a lot of different topics that will be related to sports organizations. So today we talk about strategic planning, and later we will also talk about organizational theories and how these organizational theories will be applied to the sports industries. We will also have the topics on human resource management that will talk about how we're able to recruit people, provide training to the people, and retain our employees. We'll also learn a little bit about budgeting, how we be able to develop a budget to make sure the organization is being operated efficiently and effectively and efficiency. And the last topics is related to the risk management. Okay, so in today's class, we have 3 topics that we would like to cover. So first of all, we're going to review a little bit about the management theories. There are 4 management theories we will look at today. So Taylorism, bureaucratic management, human relations movements, and organizational behaviors. And then we're going to talk about 4 steps that help us to develop a strategic plan for an organization. And also we're going to talk about 3 different levels of the strategic management. Before we start to review some of the theories that has been developed in the management, we would like to look at the definitions for the management. So what is management? So from the definitions, we can say the management is basically have 3 very important terms. The first things, the management is we have to develop goals and objective and make sure the goal and objective we develop is achievable, right? So all the business that you'll be working with in the future, they all have to develop goals, develop objective, right? So all the goal and objective when you develop, make sure the goal and objective are related to the mission statements of the organizations, and also make sure the goal and objective you develop is realistic and be able to achieve in the future. The management also emphasizes when we try to achieve this goal and objective, we have a very limited resources. Although we really want to have a lot of different resources to help us achieve the goal, unfortunately, when you're working in the business, so we just have a very limited of restricted resources. Those resources including the human resource, financial resources, and marketing resources. So we want to have a lot of people work together to help us achieve the goal, but we only have certain budget that we can use to recruit employees. Right? We're only going to work with certain numbers of people to achieve the goal. Financial resources the same, right? So we only have certain amount of the money that we can use to help the organization to achieve the goal. And marketing resources, including clients and target customers, right? So those are the restrictions when we try to achieve the goals as an organization. And the management's very important process is we will have to go and work with peoples. You know, you're not going to be work by yourself, but you work with other peoples who has been recruited and hired to perform their jobs. As we look at the developments of the management theories, there are 4 very important theories that we would like to look at today. The first theory is called scientific management. Sometimes we also call it Taylorism. So scientific management is developed by Ivan Taylor in 1911. So he published a book called The Principles of the Scientific Management. So they started to introduce the scientific management approach. So the scientific management approach is based on the concept of the planning of work to achieve efficiency, standardization, specializations, and simplifications. So the scientific management basically have 4 principles, right? The first principle is from Taylor's perspective. So all the managers, we definitely have the best way to perform a task. So he will encourage all the managers, so we need to go work really hard to find this best way to perform the task. When we are able to find this best way to perform the task, and we can really enhance the productivities. Right, so from Taylor's perspective, why people working so hard is because everyone's care about money they're making. Right, financial reward is the main motivation for the workers. So he will recommend all those managers, we will have to use the compensations to encourage people to work harder. And how much people got paid is based on how much work they have done, right? The employee who have done the most and become more productive, they're more likely to receive higher salaries, right? So Taylor's also recommends that we will have to use economic reward to find the best way to perform our job. They can really help us to maximize the productivities, right? So this is Taylor's perspective. We call it scientific management, right? We'll talk about this idea. Was introduced in 1911, so it's about 110 years ago. So Taylorism until today will still have a huge impact in the modern world. Think about what kind of jobs today we're still using Taylorisms, right? So one of the examples is a salesman, right? So salesmen normally got basic salaries, right? So how much money they will make on that particular month is based on how many products they can sell to their customers. But the more product they're able to sell to their customer, their salary, that their incomes will be improved significantly, right? Will get more monies, right? In the sports industries, right? Salesmen is one of the example. Another example is about sports agents. Some students maybe want to become a sports agent one day in the future. Sports agents, a lot of time, the money you make is based on the contract you negotiated for your clients. Right, so if the employment contract, for instance, normally you can get like 3% of the money, 2 to 3% of the money that you negotiate for your clients, which means the higher salary you negotiate for your athletes, the more compensation you'll be receiving from the process. So if you're negotiating the endorsement contract for your clients, normally you can get about 15% to 20% as the reward that you receive from helping your client to get more money for other resources, right? So this is about the Taylorisms. That's the first theory we talk about in the management. The second theory is about bureaucratic management. So the bureaucratic management theories developed by Max Weber. So Max Weber is a German socialist. So he recognized bureaucratic was actually a threat to the individual freedoms, but he also thought it was the most efficient and rational way of establishing the organizations. So from Max Weber's perspective, so for the bureaucratic management has a 6 very basic principles. Right, the first principle, you think if the business want to be very effective, the first thing they have to do is they have a task specifications. So you recruit a lot of different people in the organization. So everyone need to have a very clear ideas of the task and understand what he or she need to do. Right, that's the first principle. Second principle is about hierarchies of authorities. So he indicates every levels of the management is responsible for his staff and overall performance. So you have to build up these hierarchy relationships within your management process. And the third principle he indicates is you will have to have formal selections. So when you recruit employees, the selection process should be based on qualification and skill, not relationships and personalities. It's not like he's your cousin, so you're more likely to hire someone you know or build up a relationship with instead of hiring someone with very strong skills, skill set to perform your work. Right. The fourth principle is about the rules and requirements. Right. They say all the organization we need to introduce a very strict and consistent rules and regulations that were easier for the manager to manage the organizations. Right. And then the fifth principle is talk about impersonal. They're talking about as a manager, we try to keep some distance from our employees. We cannot so close to our employees. So we do understand the differences between professional relationships and personal relationships. And the last one is a career orientation. So when you try to work with your employee, you have to help the employee build up their skill, their expertise, and try to help them to develop a lifetime career. So this is the 6 principles that has been introduced by Max Webbs, which is also the core values for the bureaucratic management. Look at these 6 principles. So it's actually very similar to the modern business that we has been seeing on a daily basis. So it have a very huge impact to today's business, right? So this is about the second theory, bureaucratic management theory. The third theory is about human relations movement. So human relations movement theory was introduced by Elton Mayo in 1932. So Elton was born and raised in Australia. So he moved to United States in 1920. So he worked as a professor of industrial research at Harvard University. And he is pretty well known for his work based on the Hawthorne research. So he published books called Human Problems of Industrial Civilizations. So in his research, initially, he wanted to know whether if we change the working conditions, that will have a huge impact on productivities of the factories. So his initial research was actually focusing on workplace lining. So his research is basically break down into 2 different groups. One is control groups, one is a group with improved lining. So he wanted to know whether a group that work with improved lining, their productivity are much better than the control group, which is the people who work at the regular working conditions. However, he did not find a significant difference. So basically, his initial research cannot really meet with his expectations. Right, so his initial research, as we're talking about, he tried to see whether if we improve working conditions, people's productivity can be enhanced significantly. He did not find evidence to support his research goal. So which means if employees is working in a bigger office, brighter life, his productivity is not going to be increased significantly. So he was really curious and want to know what factor actually will impact people's productivities. So his research started to move to investigate the social environment instead of the working conditions. And so he found out social environments play a very important role. So workers' satisfactions, their outputs depend more on collaborations and the feeling of worth than on physical working conditions. So basically he found out if a person he's working with someone he really like, their productivity will be enhanced significantly. And also if the workers, he feel like the thing he's doing is meaningful to the entire society, can help them achieve his personal value, he will become more productive. So we talk about his main research has been focusing on the Hawthorne effect, right? These Hawthorne studies, so they find out there are 3 very important factors that will improve or have impact on the productivity. The first one is workings of the informal social factors. So we talk about these social relationship, having a pretty good relationships between manager and the employees, or the relationships among the employees would actually increase productivity. And the second thing is you have to pay attention to the workers and understand what they're actually doing. The third thing they indicate is we need to have open communications, right? So if we are able to communicate really well with each other, we're more likely to enhance the productivities. So he found out there are 3 factors that can really impact on the productivities. So this is about human relations movement, right? So last theory we're going to introduce is about organizational behavior theory, which is the most common theories nowadays. So the organization behavior theories is a study of the human behaviors in the organizational setting, right? So they look at the relationships or interface between human behaviors and the organizations and organization itself. So a lot of the organizational behavior theory has been focusing on 3 different areas. First one is how the individuals experiences when they're working in the organization. Second thing is they look at more about the relationship between employee or the relationship between employee and employer. Right? The third one is to look at how organization itself has been behaved in the changing environments. So we're using employee motivation studies as example. So what will employee be motivated in their jobs? So a lot of research has conducted in this area. So that from these little pictures, you can see, their working conditions have impact, right? Their companies' policies that will have impact that, right? The staff that will impact that. The role, the relationships will impact that. The benefit and pay will have impact on that motivation. The job securities, right? Whether people can stay here for a very long period of time, or the factory has experienced a lot of changes. A lot of people may be losing their jobs. If the policy changes, will also impact about their motivation, and also the supervisions also play a very important role. So nowadays we understand people from more different perspectives. As we look at these 4 different theories, or scientific management theories, basically we only care about productivities, right? Think about how we're able to make more products, right? So when we look at bureaucratic management theories, we started to introduce more different things to build up modern business, right? When we look at human relations research, we find out more and more studies started focusing on not just physical working conditions, but more about social working environments, right? When we look at organizational behavior theories, which is the theories has been broadly developed nowadays, we find out we look at more different areas, not just one particular perspective, right? This is how the management theory has been developed in the last 100 years, right? So the next topics we're going to talk about is talking about strategic planning, right? How are we going to develop a strategic plan for the organization?